Greetings, everyone. Pete Pardo here from Sea of Tranquility. Welcome to day 11 of albums that are 30 years old in 2022 as we look back on the year that was 1992. All sorts of interesting new genres and things happening in the early 90s. A lot of the stuff that we listened to in the 80s was changing. All sorts of different stuff happening. All sorts of genres colliding. New things being released. Classic bands, new bands from all over the world. It's been an interesting decade to look at, but specifically a year that we're looking at, 1992, and going through the memory banks and going through the list of releases and what has kind of really moved me from this particular year, putting together my list of 31, because of course 31 days in March, my 31 favorite albums released in 1992. This particular one on day 11 released July 8th, 1992 on Black Mark Records, produced by Thomas Skogsberg, the second album from Swedish death metal legion known as Edge of Sanity Unorthodox. Of course, this is the band led by and founded by none other than Dan Swano. Dan, a very, very famous producer, musician, vocalist on the Swedish scene. He has been not only, in Edge of Sanity, he has been in various other bands over the years, Nightingale, Bloodbath. He's produced Opeth. He's worked with Catatonia. He's worked with Arjen Lucassen in both Arion and Star One. Very, very notable guy. Very talented guy. Probably one of the most notable musicians to come out of Sweden over the last 30 years. And he's all over this, mainly. So this band here on this album is Dan Swano on vocals and keyboards. He also plays guitar. He also plays bass, also drums. He can do everything. Andreas Axelsson on guitars, Sammy Nerberg on guitars, Anders Lindberg on bass, and Benny Larson on drums, with some guests on classical guitar, cello, and additional vocals and things like that. So this is, like I said, their second album, pretty much a traditional Swedish death metal album. However, there are elements on this album that kind of foreshadow the more progressive turn that the band is going to take on subsequent albums, because they did release quite a few albums. Their first was Nothing But Death Remains in 91, this one in 92, The Spectral Sorrows in 93, you've got Purgatory Afterglow in 94, then it gets interesting, because then you've got Crimson in 96, which is a total progressive metal album, you got Infernal in 97, Cryptic in 97, and Crimson 2 in 2003. A lot of progressive elements, not unlike what Opeth were doing at the time, coming into their music in the albums to come after this. But some of those things happen to start on this particular album, especially on the three-part track Enigma, which has actually really nice clean vocals, because Dan is a really good melodic singer and he has some of the best death metal growls out there. But that particular song is in three parts, a lot of cool intricate guitar things, little acoustic pieces here and there. Really good proggy extreme metal song. Otherwise, you've got lots of heavy hitting, doom-laden early 90s Swedish death metal on here, specifically Afterlife is terrific, Beyond the Unknown and Nocturnal, all really heavy hitting. You've got Dead But Dreaming, and one of my favorite songs on the album, When All Is Said, which is the last track on the album, which is close to 7 minutes long. You got the two lengthy pieces are the most kind of progressive on this particular album, but When All Is Said has just some really nice little passages that evoke kind of folk, like Scandinavian folk and things like that. But then it's, of course, the majority of the song is, brutal, riffy death metal. Really good stuff here. His death metal growls are great because you can pretty much understand everything he's saying, right? I know this won't be for everybody here watching this particular show, and I get that, but this is my 31 favorites, and this is one of them, because Edge of Sanity, really great band. I often talk about how in the 90s, so much for me changed, because throughout the 80s I was a hard rock and metal guy, and a lot of what I was listening to in the 80s really changed drastically in the 90s. So I started to listen to lots of progressive rock and lots of jazz, and then eventually a lot of this kind of underground extreme metal stuff, because a lot of my heroes from the 80s were really struggling in the 90s. And so I had to kind of look elsewhere for my music, and especially now, all these years looking back, I go back to what I now listen to that came from the '90s. Some really good music. Not much of it is mainstream at all. So I know I've seen plenty of comments so far on some of these videos this month, and it's going to continue. Where it's like, oh, I've never heard of this band. It's like, well, yeah, but go check them out. Because I think there's a misconception out there that, especially for some of us older folks who were really big into music from the '70s and the '80s, we automatically think that the '90s was just a terrible year for music. Might have been, or a terrible decade for music. Might have been for some of us on the mainstream level and what was really popular and on major labels. But there actually was a ton of great music coming out in the '90s that really nobody had really heard about back then. But if you go and rediscover now, a lot of good stuff there. So if you're into extreme metal at all and you never checked out Edge of Sanity featuring Dan Swano, Unorthodox is a killer album. Great artwork on that, by the way. Black Mark Records, check it out. It's ferocious, it's heavy, and it's slightly progressive in spots as well. So thanks for watching, everybody. Visit us on the web at www.seaoftranquility.org. We're on Facebook, we're on Twitter, of course, we're here on YouTube all the damn time. Stay tuned for day 12 coming up. All right, tomorrow morning, we've also got the UK connection with Simon Bray and Stephen Reed, as well as album homework assignment this weekend. So lots of good stuff happening over the weekend. And then we'll see you all early in the week on Monday, starting with Hudson Valley Squares, Monday night. So thanks for watching, everybody. I am Pete Pardo. See you real soon. Bye-bye.